Okay, we are moving on into our main presentation, our professional education for today. Strategies for a sustainable income in retirement. This is presented by Garth Hassel, Retirement Income Certified Professional Investment Advisor, representative with Global View Capital Advisors. I'll give you a little bit on Garth's bio. He has such an extensive bio, I had to cut this down because we didn't have all morning to talk about it, but he's clearly an amazing person. So let me give you a bio on him this morning. Garth Hassel has 16 years of experience in financial services. As an executive director and financial advisor with Global View Capital Advisors, Garth holds a Series 65 securities registration in all states, and he is also currently licensed in insurance in the state of Idaho, North Carolina, Oregon, and Washington. He has earned designations as a retirement income certified professional and as a professional certified in long-term care. Garth's life experiences drive his relentless pursuit of advisory excellence. He helps ensure his clients, individuals, women, families, and business owners are protected from life's potential adverse events. Garth, we're super excited to have you here this morning and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Can I share my screen now?
Yes, please do.
Do that. You should see the title screen.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you for having me. And as for any group presentation, this is all about awareness, not advice. So it's my hope to help you see some things you already know from a slightly different perspective. So after we look at foundational principles, part one, I'll present you with a challenge question for moving on to the strategies in part two. So these principles lay a foundation for flexibility to design that sustainable income in retirement. So if you skip some of these, your options are fewer and likely less favorable. Summarize, you cannot be strategic with what you do not have. As a previous Learn presenter, I think she's here, had said, the longer your runway, the more options you have. And I believe that the runway starts before marriage. And along that line, I'm going to put in the chat, if I can get that screen back up here. Well, when I find it again, I'll put it in there. Something that I wrote for our kids, at least, that if one of our kids wants my and my wife's participation in their marriage, in their wedding, they're going to follow through with these steps. They're not hard, and they're probably the couple's first differentiation between infatuation and love. And for some reason, I can't bring up the chat, so I'll come back to that later. So every family has what I call a set of relationships that constitutes their family portfolio. We've all heard about investment portfolios, but we all have a family portfolio. And think about it this way: what costs more? Say your 401k underperforming by 2%, or 50% plus fees for a divorce. And that 50% plus fees is at the beginning of the divorce. What about the lingering fallout with stalled or never launched career? Maybe you get half the proceeds from selling the house, but can that buy the house that you need now? Probably lower Social Security benefits, the difficult dynamics of a split family and custody of minor children. All these things can come into play. And then as you become frail later in life, will all of your kids be part of the solution, or will one or more of them be part of a potential problem? So we all have a family portfolio. And then responsibilities. And I think the simplest way to ask this question is your plan 50% or 100%? And that is, did both spouses participate in the major decisions? And I don't mean just by signing forms that they didn't read. Here, honey, sign here. But by engaging in the discussions, at least at the decision point, of the pros and cons, financial and legal. So Memorial Day, we had some friends over. My wife is close friends with this other lady in their mid-50s. They have a single child who's a senior in high school. Husband's an acquaintance of mine, not my client. He was in great shape and everything, CFO of a 200-person company. But 11 days later, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and then a month later, he's gone. And I don't know. I'm not privy to the meetings they had with their financial advisor at their credit union, but what I'm hearing from her, from the widow, was probably secondhand. It sounded like she wasn't part of those meetings, but what she heard, I'm not saying what was said, but what she heard was the advisor said, "Hey," to her husband, "you'll be great, just don't die in the next 3 years." So he never had life insurance, and she's in a world of hurt. She's too ill to work. And the short of it is, she was clearly never part of those deep conversations. She wasn't a 50% decision maker, and now it's too late. She's got a very difficult situation. Likewise, my in-laws were very educated, college professor, school teacher, and I met my wife in high school. So these sound bites go back many years about how great they planned. They had a financial planner, you take them out to dinner, all this great stuff. When I got into the business, I left them alone. They had a great plan. Everything's wonderful until he dies. And my mother-in-law has no idea how much money she has, where it's coming from, why did this stop, all this kind of stuff. I'm just thinking, not saying, but thinking, where were you? Did you just go to the dinners? You had no idea what was going on. She somehow either never absorbed the information or didn't participate in the deep decision. So this is super, super important. And I think this audience would agree with that. So before part 2, I'm going to ask a question that every one of us must ask ourselves. And it's about taxes. And taxes will either go up or down. It's a binary choice. They're not going to stay the same. And evidence of that is the upcoming sunset of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. So looking ahead, here's the question. Looking ahead to living on retirement income versus earned income, which taxation assumption would you rather make? Because remember, planning is an exercise in assumptions. Now, if we knew everything, it would be more of a formula and not a plan. And your money follows your assumptions. But what happens if the assumption turns out to be incorrect? I mean, if it's correct, high five, you did great. Yeah, we got that one. And all our, chess moves with our money were right on. What if these very large assumptions turn out to be erroneous? And that's what we're looking at here for taxes. So the first assumption that might go wrong is that you're assuming taxes will be lower in retirement. And because of that, you're putting money in things like, a traditional IRA, 401k, because those contributions lower your taxable income now, lower your taxes now. And that's because, well, the traditional advice has been, hey, your taxes will be lower in retirement, which might be true. But what if they turn out to be higher? That's an assumption that could go wrong. So this exercise is saying, okay, what would the consequences be? And we're going to look at that. The other assumption that we can make that might be right or might be wrong is that, hey, taxes will be higher in retirement, but it turns out they're lower. So we positioned our money thinking if taxes are higher, I'm going to use a Roth IRA, a Roth 401k, cash value life insurance, because the growth won't be taxed. But in retirement, it turns out, oh, I would have been paying a lower marginal rate than what I'm actually, well, what my money says I would be paying. So anybody want to say which error they'd rather live with? Because again, if you're right, you're right. But if you position based on one assumption and it turns out to be the opposite, which outcome would you rather live with? Anybody want to pipe up A or B? Dead silence.
I would say B.
You'd rather live with B? Anybody else?
I'd say B as well.
You'd say B.
Ditto.
Ditto. I'm hearing B. The B's have it. So let's look at what these consequences would be. So the outcome of mistake A is that you'd run out of money sooner. Why? Because the IRS takes more of what you thought you had. So say you had a $1 million nest egg and you assumed that 25% would go to federal and state taxes, so you get to keep 750,000 of that. But turns out you only get to keep 500,000. Might that be a problem? Because remember, you can't be strategic with what you don't have. Then here's the consensus, which was B, the outcome of mistake B, which was, hey, you positioned yourself to assume taxes would be higher, but it turns out they would have been lower. But now you know exactly how much money you have to live on. So you can at least be strategic with what you have, plus your income not being mostly taxable or provisional, your taxes that you do owe are lower, and you're less likely to come into an IRMA situation, which is who knows what IRMA is? I think there's some Medicare people here that would know. IRMMA or IRMAA, income related monthly adjusted amount.
IRMA is your additional premium if you're over, your AGI is over a certain threshold.
Right. And Peggy's an expert in that. And so yeah, it's this means tested Medicare premiums. So the more your income, the more you have the privilege of paying more for your Medicare.
Yeah.
So think about it this way. When you're 90 years old, would you call knowing what you have, having replaced uncertainty with certainty, would you call that a mistake? And there's no one answer, but so it's just a question to think about. So any questions at this point, what I covered so far? No, okay. That makes it easy. And I just want to see where the chat went. That is so bizarre. Okay, moving on. Part 2. So I think it's safe to say that everybody in this audience understands what an emergency fund is. It's pretty fundamental. So consider that fund as one component of an emergency strategy. If you recall, Warren Buffett's first rule of investing, if you know it, I know Peggy knows it, but who else wants to say what they remember as Warren Buffett's first rule of investing? Anybody remember that? I guess it comes down to Peggy. I don't know.
Clearly, it's time for this class again, Garth. I can't even remember it.
Okay. His first rule of investing is don't lose your money. And anybody want to guess what the second rule of investing is?
Focus on long-term strategies.
Well, that's a trick question. Warren Buffett's second rule is to see the first rule. Not that what you said is wrong, it's good, but he's just emphasizing the importance of the first rule. So, having said that, let's apply that principle to income. So we have the emergency fund. That's the short term 3 to 6 months of expenses. But now let's not lose other high consequence things like our home, but especially our income, our ability to earn. If you or your spouse becomes disabled or dies. So remember, you cannot be strategic with what you don't have. So during retirement, the sustainable income is a combination of what I just kind of coined it as dignity-driven income. It's not rocket science. In a lot of ways that people present this is just the way I present it. So what are some things that are foundational to your dignity? Who wants to call out things that, like, I've just gotta have it?
Your house.
House,
Transportation,
absolutely. Food?
essential food, yeah, utilities,
Mhm.
My
safety.
cell phone, communication.
Healthcare? Netflix? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know, might be essential.
Might be.
Access to medical care.
Medical care. Okay.
Yeah.
And the short of it is it must be reliable. So what are those reliable sources? And now we're looking at retirement. Everything over here is going to be retirement related, not when you're working. So we all know about pensions. We know people have pensions in Idaho. We know people with Percy, and Percy's pretty well managed, but a lot of other state, municipal, and union pensions are underfunded. So these would be, I would call them well managed pensions. Not every pension's in great shape. And the other thing is that pensions often do not keep up with inflation. Another steady, definable income source could be a home equity conversion mortgage. And I know there are other members here in Learn who are expert in that. I'm not going to talk about that because there are other experts on that subject right here in this Learn community. You could have an annuity. Look at A and A plus rated companies that can give you a guaranteed income. And life insurance, yes, death benefit is for survivors, but a permanent insurance policy can have powerful living benefits. And sometimes that could be long-term care related. Or you could have a standalone long-term care policy. But speaking of dignity, long-term care supports the dignity of the care recipient and the caregivers. Can I get an amen to that?
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then there's Social Security. First, about being smart about how you take it, when you take it, and then second, I got a little asterisk here to consider its financial state, and we'll have more on that later. So that's the essentials. Then we have lifestyle, and the goal of lifestyle is to position a substantial portion of your savings and income to keep up with inflation. So you can have some growth, but you don't want the loss. So another kind of annuities can come into place with this, and the recent spike in interest rates has actually boosted the ability of insurance companies to be more generous with their annuity guarantees, especially those that have some smart indexes that aren't commonly available, but they can have a compelling lifetime income story to tell. And then for the next, say, 2 or 3 years, having safe investments, more like savings, actually. That way, this is money, it's going to be there over the next couple of years, making some amount of interest. Now, opportunity, the goal is to allow some of your portfolio to grow beyond inflation, which takes a little more time. So it's money you're fine not accessing, excuse me, not accessing for 2 or 3 years. Now, you caught the connection between lifestyle and opportunity. I said savings for like 2 or 3 years and not accessing this for 2 or 3 years. A lot of advisors, not all, of course, but many will say that should be 5 years. Anybody want to venture why they would say you want your safe money for a 5-year horizon instead of 2 or 3? Any guesses?
Less volatility?
That's a big part of it. So in 2008, it took the market over 5 years to recover. But a properly vetted tactical set of strategies recovers in half that time. You can't always buy the past. We always have to say we can't buy the past. But there's a lot of litmus tests where tactical strategies can spend twice as much time growing rather than trying to get back above water, which allows you to put more money into an opportunity position versus just holding it in a savings position. So, but everybody has their comfort zone. However, my point is there are ways to cut that down and actually get more growth in the long run. I also added real estate here. If you have the experience and expertise, I don't. Some people here do, but it's worth mentioning. And plus, its value isn't going to disappear completely because you can see it, you can touch it. If you remember Gladiator, he picks up the dirt, and rubs it in his hands before he enters battle. It's tangible. A lot of people like that, but it's not for the faint of heart. But again, other people here in this Learn community are experts in real estate. Then the top tier could be called the bucket list or woohoo factor, going to Vegas, mad money. It's that icing on the cake you want, but you can live without. And that can be, an individual stock. You live in Boise, you like Micron or HP, and you want to have a piece of that because you're surrounded by it. A lot of people just buy Apple. I knew a doctor, he just said, I just buy Apple, I just buy Apple. They have an emotional attachment or some kind of attachment. That's what they want to do. And that's fine. Just understand that it is putting all your apples in one basket. Then there's, you can have metals, crypto, I have both, I'm not against it, but understand it's more speculative, especially the crypto. And it's also taxed at a commodities higher rate. And some people dabble in currencies as well. But question, I think a lot of us here know somebody somewhere who's got a stash of metal somewhere. You've heard it in conversation at least. You don't know it, but they've talked about it. And my question is, if you need to go into your basement and grab some of that gold or silver and buy groceries with it, which metal instantly becomes the most precious? If you need to use that gold or silver to buy what you need, instantly, what metal becomes the most precious?
To you, whatever you have, right?
Or are you referring to which one, if it's gold or silver?
No, and one, it's not mentioned yet. It would
Oh.
be, it would come in, it would come into play now, now that you've used your gold. I'll give you a hint, you're sleeping with one eye open now. So lead,
Hmm.
think about that. So this is pure hypothetical, okay? This is not, sound financial planning. I'm just trying to poke some questions. If you've got to use, if you've stored up some metals in your, safe deposit box, or wherever it is, but once you break it out and you have to use it, maybe not in Idaho, it's a pretty safe place, but a lot of other places, you'll never sleep again, and you'll have to back it up with a lot of lead.
Hmm.
Just a thought. So, oops, back to here. Back to here. What you can do is think of this as a fountain. So when you have gains on any, one of these upper tiers, you can take some of those gains, if you have the discipline to, because no one knows when the top of anything is, right? But capture some gains, have a process, and then they can cascade downward to kind of bolster one of these other tiers if you think you need to. Because you don't want this thing to turn upside down. That's the point. Okay. So some considerations that are either relatively new or often ignored. COVID. Okay, no one likes talking about it, but it taught us some hard lessons. A lot of small businesses shuttered, a lot of landlords lost their rights. And we've heard the government talking about rent control, things like that. So these bring into your resource choices some new factors to consider. Do you want your retirement income insulated from these things that you really don't have, additional things you don't have control over, and you don't have conventional means for dealing with it, like when the government says you're closed. The Secure Acts of 2020, 2022, 1 and 2, massively changed rules for retirement plan beneficiary designations and associated required minimum distributions, RMDs. And I would say if you haven't visited with your estate planning attorney in the last 2 years, and especially if they wrote you a trust, and especially if you're using that trust as a beneficiary to any of your retirement accounts, then you need to go back. You need to revisit that. I'm not an attorney, and I don't play on the internet, but the short of it is the Secure Acts made trusts very undesirable for receiving retirement funds. It's a whole new ball game, and the attorney has to have a compelling reason to use that trust for retirement accounts. I'm not talking about for receiving life insurance or other assets, just for retirement accounts. And the bottom line is whatever Congress names an act, it does the opposite. I think we all figured that out by now. The silver lining to the high interest rates of the last couple of years allows insurance companies to be a little more generous with the contractual guarantees. I mentioned this a little earlier. Now the Fed started lowering their federal funds rate, that generosity is plateauing and going the other way a little bit. My suggestion is that if you need to evaluate your insurance options, don't wait. This goes for all types of insurance. So who wants to offer an explanation why interest rates affect the ability of insurance companies to be more generous with their promises? Anybody want to venture a guess why that matters? No. Okay. So insurance promises are based on a combination of premiums and what their general accounts are able to return, and their general accounts are mostly, not all, mostly in interest rate sensitive vehicles like bonds. And so if you think about the 90s, like or from the 70s onward, and in the 70s we had those high double-digit interest rates. So an insurance company issued like new long-term care policies, you know, their ability to pay those costs, those claims, was a combination of the premiums received and the return on their general accounts. But as the interest rates just kept dropping, that return kept decreasing. And yes, there is the factor of they didn't project costs very well because it was such a new phenomenon. But as interest rates fall, the general accounts do not perform as well. And so they have to choose, okay, can we keep these policies above water with just the premiums? So the interest rates, you know, when they go up, it's hard on like mortgages and lots of other things, but it is good for a lot of insurance products. And then finally, I call it progressive simplification. Question to any of you, could your attorney, in fact, run your plan? I don't think there's a yes or no answer out there. I'm not looking for one, but just plant that in your head. But whoever steps up as your agent when you become kind of incapacitated, and so now an adult child has to step up. Hopefully you've given that child the right powers of attorney. Could they run your income plan? Could it run on autopilot? Not that it should, but being short of a ward of the state, is it possible to say a cognitively challenged widow would become isolated? Is that a possibility? Who was here just talking about loneliness and isolation?
Laureen.
Lorraine. Is Lorraine still on the line? No.
Sure, I'm here.
Do you think it's not just possible, but have you ever seen or become aware of, I guess that would be the latter case, of, you know, probably a woman, could be a man, who's pretty much been isolated by family.
Yep.
Their income resources are, who's managing, who's driving?
Well, at this point, they are. Or, you know, the trouble is they're vulnerable to anyone else who might come in and be scrupulous, or not have scruples, I should say, and take advantage of them. Even
right.
family can take advantage of them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But simplification is something to consider, because when someone, if you do have someone who can step in, which is better than not having someone, then it's easier for someone to when they carve out a little bit of time to wrap their arms around a simpler plan than one that's got all kinds of moving parts.
Yeah, and
Just a
I
thought.
think the message there really is that you need to start early on talking about your financial situation with people while you're competent and capable, but you basically have a team, whoever they are, that you trust as you age. Right? And so,
Amen.
but what we do is we delay that conversation until it's almost too late.
That is 100%. That's why some of these books and these Learn members are out there, right? Right, Dara? And okay. So who remembers the brilliant Jeffrey Holder in the 7-Up Uncola Nuts commercials?
I do.
You do? Okay, you
I
can Google that.
do.
My gosh, if I could, I don't know what happened to my oh, there it is. My chat disappeared. Okay, I found it. I'm going to put this in the chat so you can have this, because first of all, here's some entertainment for after y'all take a break. That's the Jeffrey Holder thing. And then quick backtrack now that I found the chat box. That's just an article I mentioned for consider for your kids that early runway before marriage. I got a daughter who's 21 right now. Never mind, I won't go there. But it's like, honey, certain things are going to happen first before this guy pops a question. Anyway, back to Jeffrey Holder. So today, the Social Security announced the 2025 cost of living adjustment is what? Who caught that? Social Security announced their 2025 COLA, cost of living. It's 2.5%. It was 3.2% last year and 8.7% before that. 2.5% coming up. But I'm suggesting that Social Security is on track to become the new COLA. Now I'm connecting the nuts to Social Security. Every May, the Social Security Trustees report comes out. And when is the Social Security's trust fund supposed to run out?
2032, 2031.
Yeah, they're about 9 years,
Yeah.
actually. 33 is what they're saying. Doesn't matter. It's all projection, right? But the point is, it's set to run out. Now, Congress could intervene, although anybody want to put a lot of faith in Congress these days? So what would that mean? Imagine a $2,000 a month check, rather than increasing 2.5% to $2,050, it's suddenly reduced to $1,500. That's why I'm calling it the COLA, because if it isn't rescued, and it's not going to be an easy thing to do, I suggest it'll be a lot harder than when Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan did it in like April of '83 before it ran out, and it was going to run out in July of '83, and it gave us 50 years, and here we are coming in the last 9 of those years. But it's going to be harder, I believe. Of course, this is all hypothetical, right? But it's a mega trend that we have to be aware of. I suggest that it could become the new COLA. Is at the time this runs out, we're going to be 16% of the voter bloc. We're not going to have the influence of the ballot box. We talked earlier about the silver tsunami. That's true. But the boomers right now, who are on Social Security, many of them, their votes going away. So nobody knows for sure, but it's something to be aware about. So along those lines, I have a site called Social Security Risk, well, ssrisk.com. And there's a tool we can use for those who are interested. So in summary, there is kind of like the structure of what I call dignity-driven income. And I'm going to put in the chat this image if you want it as a PDF. As soon as I find the chat box again. But any questions while I'm fishing for the chat box again?
Garth, this is Charlie Hahn. I don't have a question. I do have a comment.
Yes.
My husband and I had set up our finances and had looped in our granddaughter and her brother, our grandson, to handle them when we are no longer able to do it, or it becomes necessary because we're no longer here. But based on what you just said today, I see that I need to have further conversations with them, rather than just assuming that they're going to be able to take over if I haven't looped them into where our money is coming from and where it's being held. So thank you for that this morning.
Yeah, you bet. You know, again, it's the family portfolio. Some families, well, for various reasons, that they can't bring in the adult kids into those conversations. There's reasons they have to avoid that. Sounds like in your case, you've got responsible kids that you can bring in and have constructive conversations with your advisor, right?
Yeah, and the reason that we skipped over our children and went to our grandchildren is because we're not sure that we're not going to outlive our children with their lifestyle. So we just wanted to make sure that there was somebody in the loop. But we did just, okay, will you do it? Yes, you will. Wonderful. You guys are great and awesome. And then we kind of left the conversation there. So thank you for pointing out that they kind of need to know more than will you do it. And I appreciate that from this morning's talk with you.
Garth, I appreciate that too. I think one question I would ask that I sometimes hear from clients and others is, what are my options if I don't have a family member to help me? What should I do?
Talk to your attorney in addition to your advisor, because there's a lot of legal that goes with that. You know, that's where trust can come into play. You know, because that trust is going to come into play when you lose capacity, and you might need to have a professional like bank trust department handle it. You know, and I'd recommend a local or regional bank. You know, the kind of place you walk in, you know the manager's name, as opposed to one of the mega banks. That's
Or a professional fiduciary organization as well, right? A trust company could do so as well.
yeah, a trust company could, as long as it's their profession to do that.
Correct.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, and I think, Charlie, it's, you know, more than just asking, but making, and not just the information to know where the money is, but, you know, working with those grandkids or whoever your designated person is, to give them the education that they need to engage with the advisors and the professionals, making sure they have that skill set as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the short of it is, your dignity-driven income has to last your lifetime.